Good morning, Jeremy.
Now, you've come this morning with a prop, which, of course, we can't see on the radio, but I might take a photo and put it on our Facebook page. It looks like a penny. How does this relate to the person we're talking about today?
Yes, it's a Bateman's penny, and some Warrnambool people might have Bateman's pennies in their collection without knowing it. So perhaps people, after we've spoken today, might go and check their old coin collections,
yeah, right.
Because they're quite valuable.
Are they? Oh,
yeah.
So this was legal tender.
It was in Warrnambool.
Right. Oh, okay. The plot thickens.
For a while.
Oh, okay. Where do we start then with William Bateman?
Well, William Bateman Jnr. arrived in Warrnambool in 1848, so very early on, the year after the town begins.
Right.
And Bateman Sr. and his wife came later. They came in, I think, 1854. But it's Bateman Jr. that really gets started early and builds himself, quite a lot of those early townspeople. They were spread thinly. They were in everything. He bought extensive land in the district. He involved himself in the community, and he was elected to the Roads Board, and he was on the committee of the Building Society and the Benevolent Society, right. Secretary and Treasurer of the Racing Club. And he was a trustee of Christchurch.
I'd be quicker to list the things that he wasn't involved in, perhaps.
Yeah, well, that's right. He, and in 1853, he bought into his business. He formed a company called William Bateman Jr. and Company. Mm-hmm. His father had a financial interest in it, but didn't take active part in the business. And they bought the business from Denny and Company. Now, they were general merchants. And by 1856, it was the principal business house in the district. It was they were general merchants, importers, exporters of wool and other farm produce, shipping agents and financiers. It was really a very extensive business that had a meteoric rise. It consisted of a large store in Banyan Street, and that the west east side of the first block between Merri Street and Timor Street. Mm-hmm. And the store was there, and there was also stores down at the wharf for the import and export. But the store in Banyan Street sold pretty much everything. It had furnishings, hardware, tools and timber and machinery and wagons and carts and boats and oils and spirits and harnesses, you name it, they sold it. And they also financed cropping and loaned money to farmers against their next wool and wheat crop, because banks were at early stages. There were shortages of cash in the district.
Right, yeah.
And so essentially they were merchant bankers as well as being, general merchants. And it was said that not very many people were refused money. Right. Now, this is a time when many people had rushed off to the goldfields, were coming back cashed up.
Right, I see.
And buying land at fairly inflated prices because, there's a lot of cash about and for certain people. And they weren't necessarily people who were skilled at farming, and so they, paid too much for the land and then were borrowing to stock and equip their land, and they didn't necessarily have good farming skills.
Right.
And early on his business was pretty profitable, and he was putting a lot of those profits into buying more land himself, but he was also then borrowing from the banks to run the business. So, what could possibly go wrong here? Towards the end of 1856, the business was in serious trouble. And suddenly it was announced that it had been sold to Bateman's nephew, Mr. T.W. Sellers. Now, this chap was a young chap who was working as a clerk in the business, and suddenly Bateman disappears to Melbourne to try and arrange the financial transactions with his creditors of the sale of the transfer of the business. Mysteriously also about this time, a lot of his property was transferred into his wife's name.
Right, okay.
And everyone's trying to find out what's going on. No one can find him. He's gone to Melbourne to, essentially arrange things. And the day before he's supposed to come back from Melbourne, there's a massive fire in the building. Suddenly burns to the ground.
Right, gee.
Leaving a huge hole in the middle of the main business street, Banyan Street.
Right.
So this had huge, devastating consequences for Warrnambool. because of all the people who were involved financially
depending
in
on the
this
shop,
business. The whole lot, it was just a massive collapse. And the losses suffered by his clients were heavy, and many were forced into insolvency. And we're talking about, a lot of the little names, but also the bigger businesses in Warrnambool all suddenly found themselves being forced through the insolvency courts, and these court cases went on for years, and there are lengthy details about them in the local paper. The fact that the fire left a hole in Banyan Street meant that was when the emphasis shifts around the corner into Timor Street, and Timor Street became the main street.
Oh, really?
Pretty much as the result of this fire.
Right, okay.
It had previously been that first block in Banyan Street, where all the businesses, or most of the shops and businesses were.
Right, I see.
And so, Warrnambool did recover gradually, but it took a long time. So it really was a major setback for the very
sort
young,
of fledgling town.
Yeah, fledgling town. He left the district after that, but eventually returned for a while, and later on he settled in New Zealand and went to South America, where he farmed. And on retirement, he returned to Melbourne, and he eventually died in Brighton and is buried in Brighton Cemetery.
Right, okay. So the penny then, where does that all come into all the story?
Well, the pennies were used in the business. The Jamison business in Warrnambool also issued its own currency.
So this was quite common at the time, was it?
It was a common. He had them. He was only ran this business for 3 years, but he had time to arrange for that penny to be struck in Birmingham and shipped out here. It was a very ambitious business.
Why would that? So was this kind of just an advertising thing, or what was it about?
Because there's a shortage of actual cash money, and a lot of trading was on credit, and probably you got these in change and then you used them next time for small items. I'm not sure how it worked.
Right. Okay.
But that particular penny, they're quite... When the business collapsed, people forgot about them and threw them into, as I say, their penny collections or threw them out because perhaps they were angry. But over the years, because of their scarcity and rarity, they've become quite valuable. And that particular one has an interesting story. It was given to the Historical Society in the 1970s by a bookmaker in Warrnambool who told the story that he was fielding on the Koroit races in 1946, Caulfield Cup Day, and when he got home he was going through his bag and settling his sheet for the day, and he found this silver object in the bottom of the bag that didn't look quite right. It was supposed to be a 2 shilling piece, but it didn't quite measure up, and when he took a look at it, it was that coin covered in silver paper. Right. So someone had gone to pass it off as a 2 shilling piece.
Right, wow.
And not realising, probably even then, in 1946, it was, they're worth several $100s nowadays.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Gee.
Depending on their condition. I had a lady, a grandmother, ring me from Gippsland late last year because she'd given her grandson some coins and they'd found a Bateman penny amongst it. So she'd rung the Warrnambool Historical Society to find out a bit about it.
Right.
The child was in the room and she had me on speakerphone, and I could hear the excitement when I told them that yes, it was quite valuable to hang on to it.
It's quite incredible, isn't it? I'm interested to see that it says Victoria as well. So
yes, it says Warrnambool with 1 R too. It's
okay.
It might have been the accepted spelling of the day. I'm not sure.
So this presumably would have been legal tender though up until 1966.
Yes.
Right.
Oh no, not until 1966. No, it was only legal tender at the Bateman store.
I see. Oh right, okay. Gee, that's strange.
And as I say, Jamison, the William Jamison's business had their own coins too.
That's fascinating. Janet, thanks very much. I might just hang on to that coin for a little while. Give it back to you soon.